This is What in the World is Going On. I am your host, Richard Shoff. The program, sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here only by the grace of God. I want to start this morning's program with something I received from Marvin Rosenthal. Rosenthal is president of Zion's Hope, a Messianic Jewish ministry. He was talking about turning your eyes upon Jesus, about our worship of Jesus at a time that we celebrate as his birth. Now, Christmas, the birth of Christ, I know that we're not sure this is when Christ was actually born, but it's when we celebrate. Commonly accepted, though probably not historically accurate. Anyway, in 1918, exactly 100 years ago, hymn writer Helen Howarth Lemmel penned these beautiful words, quote, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." End quote. What wonderful truth is contained in these words. But let me ask you, in the midst of all of the Christmas decorating, the baking, the gift-giving, traveling, all the festivities, did you truly turn your eyes upon Jesus? I'm not speaking of a casual glance at him while participating in some of the holiday traditions we associate with the season. No, I'm asking, was he the focus of your mind and the passion of your heart? Were you totally fixed upon Jesus? I must admit, I was not, and I trust you were. Jesus is Emmanuel, the sovereign, holy, all-powerful, all-knowing, everlasting God. 2,000 years ago, he dwelt among us, revealed his Father to us, was an example of godliness, and rendered us from our sin. We were redeemed. We were redeemed from those sins. Had it not been for him, we would be helpless and hopeless. Because of him, we can now have peace within our souls and the assurance of eternity in heaven in his glorious presence. Unquestionably, we have a wonderful reason to rejoice. Did you rejoice this Christmas season? Did I? Did we really? And yet, as I turn my eyes upon our world today, as I watch, listen, and read of our daily world events, I could easily be overwhelmed with a feeling of despair. Maybe on occasion you feel this way too, folks. The one who was the light of the world was rejected by the world that he created because men love darkness more than light. In the years since the birth of God's Son, little has changed. Men still prefer darkness. Their thoughts and deeds are basically evil. And in these last days, the wickedness has reached pandemic proportions. As I turn my eyes upon our beloved country, I see that our foundations are crumbling. While there are notable exceptions in each of these realms, government is largely corrupt, big business is materialistic, higher education is humanistic, the entertainment industry is morally bankrupt, and many of our religious institutions are completely impotent as a result of giving in to godless trends. Did you and I turn our eyes upon Jesus? He's the only rock upon which you can find an anchor for your soul. He's the only still point in a chaotic world that is spiraling completely out of control. Folks, right now I beg of you, turn your eyes upon Jesus in a lowly stable in Bethlehem and know he's the virgin-born Son of God. Turn your eyes upon Jesus and know he lived a sinless life and always did the perfect will of his Father. Turn your eyes upon Jesus at his baptism in the Jordan River and hear the voice of his Father say, quote, "This was my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." Matthew 3:17. Turn your eyes upon Jesus in the synagogue in Nazareth as he testified of himself with these words, quote, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, heal the brokenhearted, and restore sight to the blind." Luke 4:18. Turn your eyes upon Jesus as he taught his Father's truth, healed the sick, raised the dead, and demonstrated he had the power to reverse the effects of sin. Turn your eyes upon Jesus as he spoke with these triumphant words on the cross with his dying breath. It is finished. John 19:30. Turn your eyes upon Jesus on the third day following his crucifixion. See the empty tomb and know he defeated death and Satan. Turn your eyes upon Jesus and see him ascended to heaven, enthroned at the right hand of his Father as our advocate and intercessor, even today. Turn your eyes upon Jesus and see him coming again in power and great glory to judge the nations and take his rightful place as King of the earth. If you view our world through the lens of the first and second coming of Jesus Christ, you'll not despair now, nor will you be disappointed at history's end. When Jesus takes his rightful place as King of the earth, you and I will emerge victorious because he will reign triumphant. Celebrate his first coming when he came as the Lamb. That's when we first saw. But remember to anticipate his second coming when he'll return as the Lion. Folks, now take what I have shared with you, if you would, to the good listening, some words from Selwyn Duke, when he tells us about, in his words, America from midterm to end times. Truly great disasters come like a thief in the night. How many foresaw Rome's sacking in 410 A.D., her collapse 66 years later, World War I or World War II? As for today, how many see that the United States is at what some call a tipping point, what others may call a fourth turning? Whatever you call it, our American Republic is what may be its last days. This is too scary for many to contemplate. But there's something far scarier. You know what that is, listeners? Playing ostrich and not being prepared for things to come. The so-called left, ever violent since the French Revolution birth, and as power-hungry as ever, wholly controls the culture, the media, mainstream and social, academia, and entertainment. This means it controls its long-term policies since the latter is downstream of culture. So is big business, mind you, which is why the left controls most of it as well. This, of course, translates into funding. Trump's 2016 will not make America great again. It was merely a stay of execution, a prolonging of the inevitable. This should have been obvious in a country that could elect Barack Obama, and then, like the Titanic, having backed up to hit the iceberg again, re-elect him. If it wasn't, it should be obvious now that the Democrats have seized the House in a Watergate-level rout. Think back. It's just like Watergate. The notion that this was a standard result for a president's first term is only comforting when viewing matters in relative terms. That is, the political spectrum always has a right and a left side, no matter how far left that spectrum moves. The problem? Well, civilizational ebbs and flows and collapses are governed by absolutes such as right and wrong, not relative qualities such as right and left. Thinking otherwise is like supposing your transition from stage 1 to stage 4 cancer as a 70-year-old is like when you went from a bruised arm to a broken one as a 12-year-old because, well, both involve movement toward diminished states of health. This isn't your grandfather's Democrat Party. Voters this time empowered socialistic to socialist to closet communist, sexual devaluatory, rebel-rousing, low IQ, no virtue, ignorant freaks who often encourage political violence by their Antifa brown shirt useful idiots. So you see, it's not your great-grandfather's America either. It certainly isn't, folks. It certainly isn't. Remember, folks, digging into the electoral numbers also tells a story. 90% of blacks, 79% of Jews, 77% of Asians, 69% of Hispanics, and 59% of women voted Democrat. Same as usual. Can we stop now and talk about Brexit or walk-away movements? How Hispanics are natural conservatives? How Jews are waking up to the left's anti-Semitism and all the other conservative self-delusionment? People vote in accordance with their emotional and philosophical foundations. And, quote, in the words of Jonathan Swift, you cannot reason a man out of a position he was not reasoned into. Fooling oneself doesn't help. The voters are only getting worse, too, for three basic reasons: immigration, indoctrination, and moral corruption. Let's look at it, folks. Ever since the Nation Rendering Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 took effect, that was back in 1968, 85 to 90% of our immigrants have been third worlders, and 70 to 90% of them support Democrats upon naturalization. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act in 1965 at the base of the Statue of Liberty. How deceiving that was, huh? This has caused a historic demographic shift, and an electoral one, that has seen our nation go from 85+% white in 1965 to only 61% non-Hispanic white today. Let's define further the political impact using conservative figures. We absorb approximately 1.3 million legal immigrants annually. If 1% ultimately remain and are naturalized, and 50% of those vote, and 80% of that group breaks Democrat, it means a net plus for Democrats of 300,000 voters every year, and 3 million every decade. The latter number was Hillary Clinton's purported 2016 popular vote advantage. She won by popular vote. This also translates into 15 million new Democrat voters after half a century, which was as much as Barack Obama's 2000 and 2012 popular vote margins combined. Of course, illegal migration and resulting amnesties would only increase these numbers, but are wholly unnecessary to effect this cultural and electoral annihilation. But not all un-American mentalities are imported. Remember, folks, we can't make America great unless we make America moral again. Got that? You heard me. We cannot make America great again unless we make America moral again. The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Today's brainwashing, not only by academia, but also media and entertainment, is intense. Remember, we can't make America great unless we make it great. As Ben Franklin put it, quote, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters, end quote. Yet, academia, media, and especially entertainment subject each generation to an ever-intensifying demoralization process. So let's crunch a few more numbers. Between Trump's 2016 victory and Election Day 2020, more than 10 million Americans will have died. These are mostly older people. They're a relative conservative voting group. They will more or less be replaced, however, by approximately 16 million young Americans who will turn 18 during these years. Unlike their elders, though, they'll be disproportionately in casting their ballots for hardcore status. Given this ongoing immigration and indoctrination-enabled electoral degradation process, it's now clearer why Republicans have lost the popular vote in 6 of the last 7 presidential contests. Note that during our entire pre-2000 history, Republican candidates won the presidency while losing the popular vote only twice. Now it has happened twice since 2000 alone. with the GOP capturing the popular vote in just one of its 3 victories. That was G.W. Bush in 2004. How long can we continue losing it while winning the Electoral College, folks? You know we can't pull inside straights forever. Moreover, the cards won't be there. They won't be there at all once Texas turns blue, and the warning signs are already evident. Rationalization all you want, but leftist nuts Andrew, Cracker State Gilliam, Fresh Bob the phony Mexican, that was O'Rourke, and Stacy Sue-and-Source loser Abrams came close to winning in respectively Florida, Texas, and Georgia. Tallahan bubblehead Kristen Sinema did win in Arizona. You see, folks, we're farther down that rabbit hole than you might think. Leftists are already talking about 2002 with a lineup resembling the bar scene in Star Wars. But the details don't matter. Whatever the Democrat president ticket is, it'll be a ticket to hell. Not only is a society drifting further from truth, leftwards, for these reasons, but consider the Democrats' delusional perspective. Think about it, folks. Looking ahead, many of them have convinced themselves that we on the right are Nazis, fascists, bigots, and un-American, evil haters who have determined the rule of law, created a constitutional crisis, and represent a clear and present danger to the republics. We are the deplorables. Believing this, wouldn't you suppose, that were these desperate times that called for desperate measures? When the Democrats seize the presidency in both legislative chambers, which they eventually will, they'll have a justification for behaving as tyrannical as they fancy we have. They'll see it simply as responding in kind to a president we set. You'll have Antifa in power. The more, quote, conservative Supreme Court won't save us either. With their powerless and ends justify the means mentality, the left will discover that judicial supremacy is not in the Constitution. And it isn't. Unlike conservatives, though, they'll actually act upon these hunches and desires, and they'll ignore inconvenient court rulings. They'll pack the court. You know what that means? They'll have their Congress approve more members, and the additional members will all be liberal. So you see, these are our interesting times. If you're now ready to split a vein or run for the Valiums, hold on a minute. There's some good news here, too, if you want to call it that. There's no longer an American people. There are people living in America. We're balkanized, not just racially, ethically, and religiously, but also ideologically, sexual, and philosophically. We speak different languages, literally and figuratively. With open talk of open border socialism on one side and nationalism on the other, the window is now so wide that each end occupies a different time zone. Frankly, many of us hate each other. If our union were a marriage, we'd have divorced a long time ago. And I believe this is likely what will be America's fate: dissolution. It may be started by a calamity such as a severe economic collapse. If the federal government is then unable to meet its obligation, Social Security payments, food stamps, the union binding carrot will be gone, folks. If the feds ever also seek to impose a tyrannical will, certain states may nullify their dictates, creating a further rift. One thing could then lead to another and another. You see what could happen, folks? Regardless, with the left hurling figure words like Nazi, etc., fomenting unrest and attacking and bullying conservatives, the cold civil war is already afoot. Will it go hot? If so, when? For sure is that if the left keeps pushing, it eventually will get some pushback, folks. It'll sure happen. Of course, this could happen. Should it happen, we'd likely be vulnerable to enemies such as China, Muslims, the national Muslims, and their leaders. Yes, folks. But if the republic does fall and dissolve, maybe, just perhaps, one of the resulting countries will be that shining city on a hill. But remember, it will be up to us to forge it, ever bearing in mind that we can't make America great again unless we make America moral again. This means installing in ourselves virtue, including in that of courage. For whatever tears, traumas, and tribulations lie ahead, we'll need a lot of it for things to come. Back to my opening comments on today's broadcast, folks. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. And folks, what happens in the end? We have eternal subjects to think about. Eternity will be our future, whether we are saved or whether we are lost. How long?
There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good and who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
There's eternity, there's no beginning, and there is no end. Think about it, folks. I once heard this illustration, forgotten where I heard it, but I want to share it with you. Let's go to the Himalayas, the tallest mountain in the Himalayas. Let's look in our minds for a second at a small little sparrow. If that sparrow flies around that mountain in the Himalayas, that big mountain, once a year, and if it takes just a beak, a little sparrow beak of soil, once a year and drops it in the ocean, and come back the next year to take another beakful, when that mountain is flat, eternity will just have begun. Eternity, no beginning and no end. And every one of us will one day be in eternity. As we look at the problems we have today, and as we look at the problems that we're going to see tomorrow, and then we look at eternity, I come back again to our opening statement. Don't take your eyes off from Jesus.